Hi everyone, my name is Kiara, and amongst other things, I'm an animal communicator. And what this means is I am able to sense or feel and receive information from animals. And it's been a very privileged and honored experience for me. And I want to share with you some of the communications I've done with wild animals. My website is called Wild Voices Talk because that's how I first started when I was about 2 years old. I had wild birds in my hands and I was very connected to both wild and domestic animals. So today I'm going to be sharing with you a communication that I did with the gorillas this week. And when I do these communications, let me give you some context. When I do these communications, I find a space where I'm able to put my humanness aside, so to speak. I don't have another way of explaining it to you, but I'm able to go into a space, in a neutral space, where I'm able to receive pictures, feelings, and I translate these as best as I can into human form or language. And the art of animal communication and the skill is really that it's about being able to put yourself aside and to put aside the beliefs, the biases that we have as humans that we often project upon animals and interpret their behavior in that way. Sometimes it's called anthropomorphism. So I have honed the skill and refined the skill over many years, and because I want to be a conduit for the animals from their perspective. And this is being and will continue to be a lifelong process so that I'm able to continue to refine and to continue to translate, literally translate the messages that I receive from the animals so that we are able to understand them from their point of view, from their reality. So I have an animal wisdom series, and this is the first of the animal wisdom series, and gorillas have a special place in my heart. I was very privileged to be able to observe them for my first honors thesis, and I was looking for imitation in infant and mother dyads in both gorillas and gibbons. And I did find something, but it was not enough because I did not have time to continue with that project. But they have a very special place in my heart, and I want to honor them by sharing a message from them. And it took a while for me to be able to connect with them because the timing needs to be right when you do animal communications for all species, including myself as a human. And also, I've found that with the wild ones, they need to be able to check that I am who I say I am, and they want to share so that their voice is transmitted in a way that is authentic for them. And so it requires some sort of checking on their perspective. And so let's get into the animal communication now. I'm going to read it to you. When I do animal communications at a distance, I do a report or I type it out verbatim, because once the animal communication has been completed, I often don't remember absolutely every single detail that I felt and experienced. So by writing it down, I have a wonderful recollection of that I'm able to share with you, even via video or voice. So let's start. When I connect with gorillas, there are many different troops that I can choose. But I'm being drawn to Rwanda, and I'm being zoomed into that area. They know who I am, and some of them are not used to having a human who has projected herself to that area to visit them in this way. The younger ones think and feel this is strange. The older ones are just looking at me and chewing on vegetation. The earth smells different. It feels very earthy and strong. The air is moist and misty, and we're cool up in their mountains. It's so quiet. My body feels like it is calm. It feels like this when I'm with nature and the animals, and it's deep inside of me. It's a calmness that is really deep inside of me. My body knows. Something that in the industrialized world we've lost because of the day-to-day hive of activity that is created by the human mind. I can hear them talking to each other verbally, but also silently. It's so beautiful. There are multiple conversations at once, and yet they are all melding and balanced. Everyone understands each other, and there is no miscommunication. In the quietness, in the quietness. The silverback notices me now and is coming to check me out. It's his role as the protector to make sure all visitations of any nature are safe for his group. So I allow him to sniff me and to poke me a little on my back. It is inwardly quite confronting to have a silverback in your sphere with the intensity of their gaze and their breath in close proximity. I stood very still. I did not look at him. I only looked on the ground. It was instinctual. I knew I needed to be invited to stay for me to be able to talk to them. He tickled my hair, and I wanted to laugh but kept still. Then he took my arm. It was such a strong grip. I haven't felt that strong a grip before. And he pulled me with him. I went with him. We walked past the others, the females and the juveniles, and they were all watching me while still munching away. The air was cooler now, and it felt more moist. The clouds were visible. It was cloudy up there in the mountains, and the temperature changed so quickly. I felt stings on my arms, the nettles. They were a favorite for the gorillas. He sat up in the mountain, and I got the sense he wanted me to sit next to him. I kept my arms low to the ground with no sudden movements. I wanted to show respect. I also wanted to show that I was trustworthy. Then I heard his voice. I want you to learn the way of the gorilla. Then we will tell you about gorilla for you to share with the humans. His voice was loud in my right ear. His voice was calming and at the same time protective. It was also very assertive, and I knew this is what I needed to do to be considered a part of the gorilla group, to show my respect for them as a species. I agreed. I told him that I wanted to learn gorilla and for him to show me. First, he told me to sit like him. My knees were close in to my torso, my feet rolled underneath me. He told me this was important, not only because it was comfortable, I might add for him, but not so much for me, but he also said because it gave the momentum to jump in a different direction, if need be. He said that they were mostly safe except for the two-legged ones like me. They are not trustworthy and not safe. I felt bad. I apologized for humanity and their actions. I told him this is the time for him to share with humans what gorilla means, and I would share this for all to hear. Of course, I could not use the word read. They don't read, but we do. They do hear, though. He looked at me with his eyes directly in mine. It was very intense. He did not respond. He accepted my apology, and it felt like the apology was sitting in between us. We allowed it to simmer, and then to integrate in the space between and inside of us. I felt so humbled by this experience. I was humbled by the gentleness and the kindness shown to me. He took another leaf and he looked at me again. I could feel he wanted me to watch him carefully. It was a nettle. And he wanted to show me how he folded the nettle leaves so that they could eat them and not be stung. He showed me fast, and I asked him to show me again slow. All the while I was terrified. What if the nettle sting me all the way down my esophagus? I had a lump in my throat. He showed me a second time. It was such a cultivation, this folding. It felt like a ritual before food. It was part of the actual beginning of taking the nettle into the body. The nettle, he said, helped the gut for them. They liked nettle because it had iron, a lot of iron, and also it had some things that would make him feel okay. He showed me a picture. It was a picture of the forest and how much damage there was to the forest, and the gorillas running to higher ground. They were afraid to go down below, because that's where the two-legged ones were, and they were not safe. He looked at me now, with this deep sadness in his eyes. He showed me pictures and feelings of being killed, burned, and different parts being used for food or other. As an aside, the bush trade also sells gorilla meat and limbs. He made me feel how his heart was crying. It was like someone had put a sword inside the heart, and he then showed me how this was carried by all the gorillas, all the different species of gorilla. He told me that they all knew of each other. Even if they did not come together, they knew of each other. I felt deep shame. Shame for the disregard humanity has for their habitat, and disregard for the gorillas as sentient beings. I was ashamed that they endured this human-created trauma, that not only affected individual gorillas, but affected the collective. When I looked at him again, he looked like he had fire in his eyes. It was the fires that are used to burn the habitat. It reflected in his eyes. He showed me his heart crying again, and I felt my eyes well up. I sat still, but it was hard. My knees were achy, my feet were going to sleep, but I wanted to respect him as much as possible. He could see that and felt that. He grabbed my arm again, and with the same strength he pulled me deeper into the mountain. Then we came to a clearing, and the vegetation was different. I felt relief, as this meant I didn't have to attempt the nettle folding and eat the raw nettles. Here there were grasses that sometimes they ate. He showed me they would eat the heads of the grass. He pointed to some weeds. Well, they looked like weeds, and he told me not to touch those. Then another type of weed. He said when they had the runs, they used to use that. He knew so much of the environment. But it wasn't just a knowing. It was a deep feeling. A deep connection. It felt like there was what I call a nervous system to nervous system dialogue between his body and the environment. It was with his feet and his knuckles when they were connected to the earth. It was with his breath as he breathed in and out. It was a full body experience. It was incredible. I felt an aliveness that I had not felt before. He looked at me and allowed me to feel that I was not ready before this time to embrace what this was like, because my body would not have been able to understand it. It was so powerful. He also made me feel like now I understood why it took so long for me to talk to him and his relatives. He looked me deep in the eye. It was so intense, and yet it was so gentle. I felt like I could go flying out of my body into the universe by looking at his eyes. It was hypnotic. He gave me a top of the grass where the seeds were. He folded it in on itself and gave it to me. I took it and began to eat it. He was quite impressed, and I could feel he was happy. I had followed through. He felt good in his stomach now. I was okay and I was respectful. I wasn't a bad human. The grass tasted tart. And it took a lot of courage to swallow it when I chewed and chewed and chewed, and it didn't seem like it was enough. He grabbed my hand again, and we were going down the mountain. He was going so fast I kept on losing my balance, and he looked at me and he thought that was odd. He let go of my hand. And we bounded it, and he bounded ahead and let me move how I wanted. He looked sideways every now and again to see I was there. His head was darting around because he needed to check that all was okay. As he came to rest with the group, he puffed himself up. He puffed his whole body, and he was so much bigger than before. It was intimidating. He stood high on his front legs, on his knuckles, and the back legs, and his body was very taut. He went to each of the females and sat with them a bit. I felt like I was invisible, but really I wasn't. I was accepted. They were going about their own lives and letting me have a feel, a glimpse, an experience with them. What a privilege! As I thought this, they all turned to look at me, their eyes intensely on my form, and I could feel them penetrating inside of me. They were looking at me on the inside. They were reading my energy body. It was quite a trippy experience to have them all do this at once. It's like having peeping toms inside your energy body that are only looking at you to see who you are, nothing more. When they all left, I could feel my energy body move back into the position it had before. It was surreal. One of the females came to me, and like the silverback, he sniffed me all over. And she poked me in my chest. I got the sense she needed to be satisfied for herself about who I was. Then the other females came, and some of the juveniles that were not far from their mothers. They also poked my chest and sniffed me. Then they put their hands on my hair and head. Their hands were heavy on my head. Then they started to groom me a little. I was not up to gorilla standard, you see, and they wanted to change that. They wanted me to feel what gorilla family felt like. The females were different. They had their own strength that was not only deep, but their connection to earth was different to the male. When their feet and knuckles, or with splayed hands, touched the earth, they talked to the earth. They asked for parchment to be abated. They also asked for more food when they needed it. There was a direct link between them and the earth. They asked for protection from the two-legged ones. They were scared of humans. Scared of humans. When they lost one of their clan, it was a grief for all the females and the male. The females shared everything with the earth, their experiences, feelings, and their joys. Joys for the gorillas were when there was food, when the young ones played, and when there was abundance for all the members of the family. There were some of the older females who shared a great deal of wisdom with the younger ones. They seemed to be what we would term a culture. They were able to tap into their specific species' uniqueness, and they would share it with the rest of the group. They were so deeply connected to the earth because they'd built relationship with the earth over a long period of time. And it felt like their bodies had the ability to process information differently than a young body. This deep wisdom is the peace they want to share with humanity. That each animal has a deep wisdom that they bring with their species as a whole. They are also an expression of the deep wisdom of the earth, and each of them play an intricate part in the stability of the earth as a whole. What they showed me was that this was on a micro level in their own environment, but it also was on a macro level, as every small environment affected all the ones near it and so on. It was a ripple or butterfly effect. The older female shared her consciousness with me, and she shared pictures and feelings. She showed me how the earth was not best pleased with what humans were doing. There was no balance. The humans had lost their ability to sense in the other realm, and they were saddened by this, the gorillas, that is. She had a quizzical look in her eyes now, and she asked me, how did I do this? How did I remember? I looked at her and it felt like I had to do sign language. I didn't study sign language, but I was using a type of sign language with her that involved feelings, pictures, and using my hands for certain gestures so she could hear and see me. It felt like this sign language was old. It was older than I could even grasp. She looked at me with this knowing in her eyes. She recognized me now. She knew now I came into the world with the DNA open to the animals. It was changed, and she showed me how it had a nick in it, and that this nick was there because it would allow me to choose to offer the animals a voice. I thanked her, and again, using sign language mix, I asked her when it was decided on this planet that it would be so. She said at my birth I decided I wanted to be with the animals. She proceeded to show me all the animals, wild and domestic, that touched my life from then until now, and she allowed me to feel that these were not coincidences. She allowed me to feel how the animals could sense me and that they were open to me looking at them. They told me I needed to go through some iterations before I could actually interpret what they were saying from their perspective. She said that this wasn't so much when I was little, because I was more open, but after I started to be shut down by society, then the iterations needed to come into play. And I had many different experiences that brought me back to the animals. She showed me that if the world was different, they would have found me sooner, but the domestic animals took care of me. She touched my arm, and I felt the warmth of her hand and the tickle of her fur. She was sharing energy with me. It was gorilla energy. She looked at me directly in the eyes and said, "Don't let them take my babies. Don't let them take my family." I looked at her deeply and my heart was crying. It was crying for the loss of their babies and family, and for the intervention of humans in their habitat, and them being taken to be put in concrete places. She looked at me and she said she did not want to talk about the ones in those places that humans go to, the ones in captivity. She was sad and she was also angry, but it was a different type of anger. It was not exactly the same as what we humans have. She felt we had lost our sacredness, and that we treated them like they were just... And she showed me a picture of a monkey. Apes have no tail, but monkeys do. It didn't feel like it was very derogatory at all. It was an explanation of the mismatch of the animal essence. It was the feeling of humans projecting on animals their superiority. This is what it felt like when she showed that picture. She says that all animals are here for a reason, have their purpose, but it is disrespectful for humans to not honor them for their animal essence that they are. She was saying that honoring them meant respecting their place, where they lived, their form, their bodies, their food, their ways, and their families and animal essence. Then she showed me a human print. And she showed me how it was everywhere. And then she showed me an animal print. And she showed me how very specific it was. It felt like she was saying that the human print was everywhere, but the animal print was niche. It was in a certain space or place. And then she showed me how everything was connected, and that there was a reason for everything, and that things are not always what they look like or what they seem. She touched my chest again. She was finishing now. They were moving away up in the mountain, and the silverback is at the front. As he looks down at his group, he looks at me. I had the feeling of, do not forget. How could I forget this? How could I forget? That would not be possible. I will not forget.